So, hello and welcome to the first one of these lives with Ukrainian teachers of English for 2025. It's crazy weather here at the moment and my internet connection's been a bit erratic, so you may have to just bear with me. We'll see how we get on. Today, I'm actually going to be talking to someone I also work with as their teacher, Renata. And I know that she's asked if we can sort of abandon the traditional format that I've been using to do these kinds of things, where I have a sort of list of talking points that I run through, because I know that she wants to talk very centrally about her experience of growing up in Donbas. Those of you outside of Ukraine who are watching this, I'm not sure how much you know about Donbas, but Donbas was originally a kind of industrial and sort of mining based area. The two main cities were Lugansk and Donetsk, and these areas have been under Russian occupation since 2014. There was also a huge amount of kind of Russian disinformation around these areas, about these areas being separatist regions that wanted to somehow join the Russian Federation. There were also loads of stories in the Russian media about how our people, meaning Russian-speaking Ukrainians living under occupation, were suffering because of the Ukrainians bombing them. It's funny how if you occupy a part of people's countries, they end up bombing those bits of the country in order to try and deoccupy them. But there you go. And when the full-scale invasion started, one of the things I got a lot from people inside Russia was, where have you been the last 8 years? Basically meaning, why have you turned a blind eye to what they liked to believe had been the genocide of the people of Donbas? Actually, between 2014 and 2022, when the full-scale invasion started, I think there were something like 13,000 deaths, the vast majority of whom were people in the armed forces. So I can see that Renata's just asked to join. Let me get her on, and she can tell you much more than I can about Donbas and what it was like growing up there, and what it's like coming from somewhere that's now under occupation. Let me just accept her. Hoping so. Doesn't always work first time. Sorry, let me faff around. Hey, Renata.
Yeah, hi.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm okay.
Yeah, have you got crazy weather down there? I know you're in Bristol now, right?
I yeah, but it's all right. It's
Yeah?
fine. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. Yes. How have you been today?
Yeah, I'm okay. It's been a working morning for me, so I'm just kind of, this is the last thing I'm doing today, so
Good.
it's yeah. Back to work tomorrow, but yeah.
Yeah. So
So, do
I
you wanna?
wanted to once again thank you for the opportunity to speak about Donbass, because it never feels enough when people start speaking about Donbass or even like Ukraine. It just never is enough. And thank you again for giving this platform and opportunity to talk about
You're
it. Yeah.
welcome. I guess for me, I feel a particular kind of guilt because I was in Donetsk in 2013, and after the occupation, I carried on going to Russia, and I don't think I fully kind of understood what had happened in Donbass until much later myself. Um, and now I know I'm not alone in this. I know a lot of Ukrainians also didn't fully understand what was happening in Donbass. So maybe we can begin just with you talking a little bit about where you're from, where you grew up.
So I am from a very little town. It's called Selidove, and it's located like 40 kilometers away from Donetsk. And back in 2014, we were really lucky that we were not occupied. For some time, we were this like gray area, and like maybe for a year or 2 years. But later, we were just like normal parts of Ukraine, and nothing happened to our life, so it was not anyhow interrupted. But of course, we lost like Donetsk because we were kind of like maybe like a suburban area, or like maybe not the outskirts because it's quite far, but we had like this agglomeration, let's call it this way. So people would go to Donetsk to work, and they would just live in our little town, and because it's nicer and cheaper. Yeah, and
And that's where you were born. That's where you
yeah,
grew up. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
was born there. I grew up there, and I left it in actually in 2013, and because I started at university, and I started in Kharkiv, and when all the situation started in Donetsk, I just remembered that I lost the connection, like any way to connect with my parents in 2013 and 2014, because all the like coverage was just disrupted somehow, and I just remember we couldn't call my parents, like anyone, so no one could call their relatives back home for some time, and it was quite worrying. But to be honest, like that's the biggest thing that happened in my town, so nothing else happened. And also we had a huge water disruption, because like maybe you know that in Donetsk they have like now very big problems with water supply, and they sometimes just like stay without water for months, years, and so on. So the reason for that is because between our towns, so my town and Donetsk, we have a huge water reservoir, and sometimes it was the place where they would have some fight, and that's why this like pump station was damaged sometimes. And as for our water supply, we occasionally could get it from somewhere else, but as for Donetsk, it was just like somehow it yeah, so they did not have any water supply at all, and still they have this problem, and it's because of this water reservoir. And they actually bombed it last year, and now there is no water supply to my town, to Donetsk, and it's like always messy, and it's quite brutal. Yeah, but as I said, so in 2014, these two major things happened. So no water for half a year, and some problems with connection and with the signal there. But that's it. So we were quite lucky. I remember that maybe in 2016, 2017, 2018, when we saw some people in Donetsk, we understood how lucky we were
Yeah.
to be just like right, right there, right in Ukraine, because our life was quite okay, quite normal, and we looked at our relatives in Donetsk, and we understood how many challenges they have, and it was
And
always horrible to see. Yeah.
are your family originally from the Donbas region?
Not really. Like during the Soviet times, they relocated to Donbas because it was like an industrial area, and so you could always find a job there easily, and that's why my family relocated. But I do have relatives in Donetsk, and they just stay there, and I guess they were born there as well. Yeah.
And so when you were growing up, did you grow up? I mean, I'm imagining that part of Ukraine at that point was quite Russian speaking, yeah?
Yeah. Yes.
And so did you grow up in a Russian speaking family?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Everyone in Russian, and I went to a Russian speaking school, and like I believe that if you were traveling from Russia to Donetsk, you would not feel any difference. So you would still feel as if you were in Russia, and all the signs were in Russian, books were in Russian, and everyone was speaking in Russian. Maybe like in villages, people would speak some Ukrainian, but mainly, of course, Russian. Yeah, Russian.
And did that affect the way that people saw themselves? I mean, in terms of their identity and who they thought they were, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say, even based on my experience, how I felt, because I was 17 when the war started, and I can say that before that, I had been growing up as if I had like two parents. I had like Ukraine as my mom and Russia as my dad. And at that moment, it just why we didn't feel that like the war started, because at that moment it felt like they are going through something, maybe like divorce, and you understand that like you have to pick sides, because you feel like very connected to both places. You feel like Russian literature is also your literature, but Ukrainian song is also your Ukrainian song. So it's like you have this dual nature. So on one side, so there was Ukrainian culture with beautiful flowers and songs, and then we had Russia with their depression and I don't know what else. Yeah, so just it was always like a mixture of those things. Yes, and I remember in 2014 when it happened. So it was just asking yourself who you are, like trying to maybe answer the most basic question, and it just felt impossible to answer. But of course later on we just understood, like, no, Russia is a very bad dad, and he hits mom and he hits the children. Yeah, so that's why of course it's better to stay with mom. But at that moment, yes, of course, like as a person, your personality builds on like two countries, and it's quite hard to, I don't know, to get detached from one. Yeah.
And presumably that means you're kind of growing up in a Russian speaking information space and kind of absorbing information from Russia through the Russian speaking information space as well, yeah?
Yeah, yes, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you got to kind of 2013, 2014, and the kind of, I don't know, the conflict, the occupation in Donbas first started, what was the first experience you had of it? What did you, when did you notice it was happening, and how did it impact you?
Oh, to be honest, even when it was starting, we couldn't realize what was happening. Back then, I was living in Kharkiv, and I remember as a student, I would just go to see my parents sometimes, like once a month. And I remember it was May.
How
And
far was it from Kharkiv to your parents' place? How long did it take you?
we would have to take a train to Donetsk, and then my father usually would pick me up, and it was 30-minute drive, and we were home.
Okay.
Or like, yeah, so, but first you need to take a train to Donetsk. Yes, and I remember once we arranged this family get together, and it was May, so all these things were just happening. They were just started to happen, and I just remember seeing like big sacks with sand, and they were like building these checkpoints for you, like when entering the city or leaving the city. And I remember how exactly they were putting them together. But one crazy story happened when my father came to pick me up, and we couldn't take the main road because the fights were already happening there. So there were some tanks and armored vehicles, and we had to go through fields because like basically you're like in the middle of a fight and you just drive through fields to get home. And I remember that was a crazy experience. And we even were stopped by one it wasn't like a Russian soldier, but it was from like a soldier from Donetsk, and he asked us like, where are you going? And we said like to Selid, like back home. And so he said like, you are like so crazy, like what are you doing here? Just leave and never come back. And that was actually the last time I was in Donetsk. So my father picked me up and we just went through the fight. And of course it's a crazy experience, but I think from that moment we realized what was happening, because at that moment it did not feel serious. It didn't feel it just felt like a conflict. Like some Donetsk people wanted something, Ukrainians were against, like the government, Ukrainian government were against it, and like there should be a conflict and then it will be settled and everything will be fine. Yeah, but no, it did not happen.
And did you realize at that point that there were Russians involved as well? I mean,
No,
no.
to be honest, no, because I think it was beautifully done,
Yeah.
and I see I did know, and I don't know them now, but I did see those people who were participating in those fights, and they were originally from Donbas, so they were not Russians. And I know that there were quite a lot of them, but it did not happen because because of like only of the propaganda. Like, okay, it happened because of the propaganda, but also this nature, as I explained. So like mom and dad. So just lots of people chose the wrong side, and that's why. But later they started analyzing because it was also quite fast. And when you're when everything changes fast, and so when you have like this strong link to both of the countries, lots of people can easily make mistakes, and that's why I understand that now Donbas is less pro-Russian as it used to be, but where it comes from, because I was like this myself.
And so what then happened with like 2014, and you're still in Kharkiv and your family are still 40 kilometers from what basically became a front line, yeah?
Yeah, but again, at that moment we did not see it like that. So because like Donetsk was still quite far from us, so it's still 40 kilometers, so it's fine. And that's why like we had this inconveniences with the water supply and signal coverage, but later they were sorted and everyone kind of like forgot, and life just went on. Of course, it's terrible to say, but this is what happened.
And were there still people who were able to go in and work in Donetsk and stuff, or not?
Not really, because
There was a
from that,
kind of weird border sort of developed, yeah?
yeah. So you could maybe go there for a trip, so you could see your relatives, and that was quite common because I still have relatives in Donetsk, and like before, not even the full-scale invasion, but before COVID, it was to go and spend some time there, but not like you would work there. It work like this, yeah.
You had to kind of make a conscious effort to try and go there, and there were checkpoints and all of that kind of thing, yeah?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Like it kind of was like blocked off from us, yeah. So we just had like a normal life, and we were basically like the last points of Ukrainian territory, and then we had like and still we have it like a highway taking us to Donetsk, and in this highway we had our own Ukrainian checkpoint, and you were not allowed to move further, and so it was like the final point, and unfortunately the rest of it was blocked off, yeah.
And were you still able to contact friends or relatives that you knew in Donetsk at that point, or
Yeah,
you were?
yeah, we were, and maybe we still are, but I'm not sure, because why we had this problem with the signal. So they were changing the like network somehow, like they were changing something there, and they had their own mobile operator, and that somehow affected us as well. And I know that you could call it this mobile operator from Ukrainian numbers, but I'm not sure about now. So maybe now it's prohibited. Yeah, so you just can't do it.
And so at that point, were you still in touch with people that you knew inside Donetsk?
Yeah, yes.
And what was their experience?
Oh, they just like they did not support what was happening, of course, and unfortunately now, even now, they do not support and stay in the town for different reasons. Some people just like Donetsk. That's like one of the reasons why they stayed, or they maybe just relatives. Like that's another reason why they would stay. But of course, what they say right now, like they do not feel safe to talk freely about
Of course.
about the situation, and they have to participate in this military events. For example, for children, they need to put on this military uniform for some events, and they have to buy it, they have to do it, and there is no way for them to stay out of it. And that's why that's something they complain about to us, but still they actively participate in those events as well. I do not understand why. Like I would like personally not be able to push my child to the school and wearing it. So it's quite interesting why they do it and how they do it, but they do it. Yes.
Wow. And so when did it look like the lines basically became frozen? Was that sort of like 2014, 2015?
I would say maybe 2017, 2018. So
okay, a bit later, yeah.
yeah, much later, because do you, I think you've heard of Avdiivka.
Yeah,
Yes.
of course,
Yeah,
of
so
course.
it was like the first Ukrainian city after the front line, and like town. And I remember we even traveled there, and it was crazy because it basically was like at the front line. And we traveled there because there was a very beautiful quarry there, and we went there just to swim. Yeah, it it it, it was beautiful, and it is. Yeah, I think that since Avdiivka fell, so it was like last year, if I'm not mistaken. Was it last year?
2023 or 2024? 2023, I think. Bakhmut 23, Avdiivka 24. Yeah,
Okay.
beginning of last year.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. So when it fell, we just felt that the front line is advancing and we are next. And
How far was Avdiivka from where your parents are?
maybe like 30 kilometers
Oh, yeah, close. Yeah.
closer to, like we had like Donetsk, next is Avdiivka, and we are further like on the highway. And this is when we actually like felt okay, we are next. And like my family started making like plans of what to do next. And I just remember last year, maybe in November, they hit the first residential building. And before that, like there were occasional hits, but it was like first proper residential building that was damaged by a Russian missile, and just overnight. And I remember back then I thought like, okay, that's the beginning. Yeah,
And
so
where were you at this point? Were you back with your parents, or were you?
I was on my way to my native town, so I was actually going there. And I remember I opened the news, and I was like, okay, yeah. So and I am like going to take a train to my native town on the on this day. And it was of course like a crazy experience as well. Yeah, but yeah, so I was there, and it was basically like the last time I was home. I was also home this June, but this was like a few hours, and then I left. And I remember back then, my friends worked in the like in our local town hall, and they were in charge of media and coverage of all these missile attacks. And I remember that back then they started talking about evacuation, and town hall was going to be evacuated as well, and there were plans that should be followed a bit later. And they left the town in February, so last year. And uh, in June, it was my parents left the town, and maybe in September the town was occupied. Maybe August, September. Yeah,
Where did
so
your parents go, Renata?
they were in Kremenchuk. Yeah, that's a town in Ukraine. And now they kind of like they don't have a solid plan, so they are still like trying to see what to do next. And but now they are in Ukraine. Yeah.
And when the town fell, how does that feel for you? I mean, how does it feel knowing that the place you grew up in, the place that all of your childhood memories are in, is now kind of, I mean, A, I guess mostly destroyed, and B, kind of under Russian control, yeah?
Yeah, yeah. So it was like it took a few months for them to take the town. And I remember the official day when it happened. It actually happens in October, and I remember seeing the video. And you must know that they like recording these videos where they remove the Ukrainian
Yeah.
flag, and
Yeah.
and I just saw this town hall where my friends were working, and it was in the middle of the city. And this Russian soldier on top of this building, and throwing away the Ukrainian flag and putting the Russian cloth. And when I saw it, it felt like what we were discussing with the friends is that like the main thing about all this occupation is that Russians come to our towns knowing nothing about them. So those streets do not mean anything to them. Those buildings do not mean anything to them. And then you saw this Russian soldier on top of the town hall, which means so much to you and means nothing to him, doing this thing. And I felt just angry because they do not appreciate this town as much as we do. And all people from my town, we love our town. And it just feels extremely insulting, to be honest, and hurtful to just see them in our town and knowing that they will be walking those streets and not us, and it means nothing to them and means so much to us, and that is very unfair. Yeah, but I would say that maybe uh, like now I'm not sure how to feel because I'm still like getting used to this new reality, because it's nice to have a home, and when you don't have a home, it's a bit like you didn't have this like foundation under your knees, under your feet,
Yeah.
and it's like challenging. But I'm getting used to it, and I'm trying to get used to learning in a new way when you have no roots and you have no home and you're just like citizen of the world. Yeah.
When did you become aware of the fact that the Russians were using what was happening in Donbas as a kind of propaganda tool back home in Russia? Because I was saying just before you joined, one of the most amazing things for me was when the full-scale war started and I started writing and talking about the war, I'd get lots and lots of messages from Russia saying, where were you the last 8 years? Why don't you care about the genocide of the people of Donbas? And you realize how strongly they've used the occupation of Donbas as a propaganda tool back in Russia to say, you know, Russian-speaking people of Donbas were genocided by Ukraine and we're there to save them and liberate them. And was there a point at which you became aware of the fact that that was happening?
Um, yeah, but again, maybe like it was 2016, 2017, and especially it happened when I occasionally saw some shows performed by Solovyov, like the main
Yeah,
propaganda. Yes.
yeah. For the
And
people outside of Ukraine or the Russian-speaking world who don't know it, Solovyov is one of the kind of main government talking heads who's often on state-sanctioned, state-sponsored TV promoting Russian genocide, essentially. You know, he's kind of a war-supporting propagandist and has become ever more and more insane and extreme over the years, really.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Now, of course, I think he's lost his mind, and so I don't know what's happening to him. Yeah, but I remember that every time he mentioned Donbass in his speeches, or when you saw some propaganda pieces on Donbass and how this crucified
Yeah,
boy, maybe you've heard.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, yeah. The upside down crucified
yeah,
boy. You
yeah,
know.
absolutely. So when you hear those stories, you understand like yeah, it's like it's on one hand it's beautifully made, but on the other hand it's so poorly made. It's beautiful, to be honest, and then you realize that yes, what was happening in that like Donbass was just like a chess piece in the hands of Russia, and yeah, so we kind of would say I would say that lots of people in Donbass now feel betrayed by Russia, and maybe not now, but back in 2014, 15, 16, yeah, so lots of Donbass people felt just betrayed, yes, and we know.
I think one thing that's interesting for me is how appallingly bad they are at rebuilding things they've destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, you look at things like Syria as well, where they kind of destroyed large chunks of Aleppo to support Assad, and then just kind of left it and just kind of it's okay, we own it now. We don't need to care what we do with it. And I mean, it doesn't surprise me to hear what you were saying about Donetsk and not having water supply. And, you know, life apparently didn't suddenly get better now that people had been liberated by, you know, by Russia.
Yeah,
And
and
there's,
I'll tell you just a little story. It happened just this new year, and our town was occupied like in October, like properly occupied, and they had some like Russian volunteers come into our town to like give some presents to for children, like sweets and maybe toys. And I saw one of those videos of how they come and how they meet the children and how they one of the wishes that they make: I hope next year you will not have to stay in the shelter, stay in the basement during the New Year's night, and you will be able to celebrate New Year's in a new school, blah, blah, blah. And you just watch it and you're like, just leave. And children would be okay, and like they would not have to stay in the basement. But those volunteers, they come and they promise a better life, which will never happen. And
Yeah.
that's quite sad.
The level of brainwashing is really, really scary. I remember seeing the videos of the children from Mariupol who were taken to Moscow to kind of, be presented and to thank Putin for everything he'd done whilst mass murdering the Russian-speaking people of Mariupol, and the way that they get children to be involved in that kind of propaganda is just really, really chilling. I find it. It's terrifying. It's kind of it's like stealing a whole generation of kids from those areas and grooming them to become the next generation of fighters for them.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I even notice it right now when they speak to those children. The children react to Russian soldiers and Russian volunteers as if these people have really come to save them. Because when you're adult, of course, you may have a different opinion, but children see them as rescuers, especially if those people come with sweets. And they just see and they understand like they have to be forever grateful to these people for bringing the gifts and just staying with you. And but of course, it's when you just see the bigger picture, you understand that people just destroyed your life and then trying to do something good for you. Yeah.
And so where were you living in between all of this? Were you in Kharkiv the whole time, or
Uh, when?
so say from sort of 2014 up to sort of 2022, 2023?
So I came back to my native town when COVID started,
Okay.
so it was 2020, and I lived there till the full-scale invasion, and like for 2 years. And I could say that it was amazing to live there, and the life there was really cool and so peaceful and slow. Yeah, very beautiful. And back then, I would say that I had actually an ongoing joke because at that moment I decided to stay because I had like a flat there and I wanted to renovate it and to move in. And when I just started the renovation, I was joking that as soon as I finish, the war will start. And that's exactly what happened. And so yeah, unfortunately, like we knew that like Donetsk is close, that it's like not the end of the war, that it will start, but we still like hoped for the best. So all people who lived in my town, they still had plans. They tried to like buy property, start business there, and that's what I really liked about our town. That it's quite small and it's quite easy to start a business there. So like to open like a little cafe, a shop, and so on and so forth. So it's because we need it, and that's what I also wanted to open an English school there and like help children to study English and I don't know, live. Yes,
Well,
and
one of my friends in Kiev had been saving up for 10 years with her partner to buy an apartment, and they bought an apartment, and within the first about a month later it was hit by a missile and the start of the full-scale invasion. And
um,
it's like you spent 10 years trying to save up for something and then it's just taken out like that.
yeah. And I remember in 2022, so when it just started, we knew, of course, that Putin was preparing something.
Yeah.
And the day when he announced that Donetsk Oblast is now a part of Russia,
Yeah.
and I remember on that day I was walking in my town, and it was quite late at night, and we were thinking like then, like, are we Russia now? Like, how do we check? Because we are in Donetsk Oblast, And like, how do you understand which part of the Donetsk Oblast is now Russia? Are we Russia? Maybe
So they
we.
declared that the whole thing suddenly belonged to Russia, right?
Yeah, we still don't know, to be honest, because they would understand it, like what part of the Donetsk Oblast is now Russia, and they still don't have an answer.
Well,
And
you know those signs they put up in Moscow which says Russia has no borders.
yeah,
It's like they just, wherever they decide to draw the line this week is their borders, apparently.
yes. So apparently you are also in Russia. Yes.
Uh, So
Well,
they tell me. So they tell me, or in Solovyov's dreams, I think, in Solovyov's dreams, London is just a kind of minor suburb of Moscow or something. Yeah, after they come to liberate the Russian-speaking population of West London. Uh,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
so, what were your memories or your experiences of the start of the full-scale invasion, Renata?
So back on that night when he just announced it, I remember I just walked through by the town hall and I checked the flag. It was still Ukrainian. I was like, okay, we're all right. And 2 days later, 24th of February. So, like, I was following the news very actively because I knew something would happen. And I remember on the very first day when I just woke up, and I saw the messages. My mom called, like it was quite a mess. And I just remember seeing messages from my friends in Kharkiv, and I saw their messages. I looked out of the window and like, why Kharkiv? Because to be honest, I expected them to just keep advancing towards the center of Ukraine through our town and like Donetsk, like just going further. And I remember that at that moment, I just couldn't understand, like Kharkiv, Kiev, Odessa, like all the towns, but not us. And it felt so weird because I was worried about everyone in Ukraine, and I
So,
just
so to begin with, you didn't notice the war actually happening where you were.
no. That's
That's really weird, yeah.
thing because we knew something would happen in Donetsk, in Donbas, like 100%. But Kharkiv, like why would you ever bomb Kharkiv? It's like the most stupid thing to do, I think, in these circumstances. And we lived normally, nothing changed for like 56 days. Yeah, I remember we were counting. And so then we started hearing something in the distance. And then we realized, okay, so it's not only those cities in Ukraine, so it will be all over the country. And then I left my town in May, and I like life was more or less okay. And they would occasionally hit some buildings and some neighboring towns, but these were always neighboring towns. And
Where did you go initially, Renata?
first I went to Lviv, and then from Lviv I went to Bristol. Yeah, so
Okay.
yes, I stayed. I came to Bristol in July.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, I left my town in May and came here in July. Yeah, and of course I just remembered that it was so weird to see our life without any change at all for 60 days. And so then knowing that your friends like are live in Kharkiv and they are evacuating, and it was really crazy, but you just stay at home and you are in Donbas and you are safe. And I even remember offering my friends to come to my town as a yeah, but no, they of course went to the west. Yeah, but that was the first reaction, and it was really amazing, to be honest. At that moment it was.
And what was the experience of being displaced for you and moving to Lviv and then having to get across the border and then going to Bristol? How was that?
uh it was quite difficult because I left with my sister, and at that moment she was 12, and we had like this difficult conversation with my parents because I knew that like I think by day 50, I just realized we have to
Yeah.
leave. And my parents had a business in our town, so that's why they just decided to stay. And because like when the war started, we had less competition, because lots of businesses left the town, and that's why my parents could just like work and make even good money.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they decided to stay there, and like it was quite risky, but that was their decision. And I left with my sister, and so I became her guardian, and she's still living with
Oh,
me.
really?
And
I didn't know.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's why it was challenging, not only because it was a new country, but because it was a new role for
Yeah.
me, and
Yeah.
I kind of became a mom. Yeah, so it was quite difficult, and I also had to look after her, and she joined the school here, but it didn't work out well, so that's why she was homeschooled for some time. Now she's going again, but it's a different school, so
What was the problem at the school, if you don't mind me asking?
yeah, it's fine. So the biggest problem was that at that moment we still like lived in Ukraine, and we saw everything happening in Ukraine.
Yeah.
But we also have to live in a very peaceful and nice place, and it is such a disbalance of what you're feeling and what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think you also feel a bit like it's like hurt maybe, and also it's like unfair. Yeah, so like hurt, unfair, and this is how you perceive the whole situation. So it's just like you can't make an easy breezy conversation with a person, so you can't have it. So you just, all your thoughts are about the
Yeah.
war and like dying and the cities being destroyed. And when someone asks like, how are you, so it's like it's hard to switch from this reality to this reality.
Yeah.
And that's why she also couldn't talk to the children, because the children are still children, and she had to grow up quite quickly, because she was 12, now she's 15. And when you talk to her, she is not like a typical British teenager,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah.
So you can have a deep conversation with her, and she just couldn't stay in the school because of her like mental state. And she just like asked me at that moment, like, could I please not go to school, because I can't talk to those children. I don't know what about, they do not understand me, and I don't understand them.
And
Yeah, but
did you come to the UK under the like, what was it, Homes for
yeah,
Ukraine thing? So you had like a sponsor or a host family or something? Yeah. Yeah.
like I will be forever grateful for their help. And to be honest, like the amount of help which you get when you come to the UK back then, so when you came to the UK, so it was just like everyone wants to help you, just everyone. And I just remember a man, he was helping us to find a school for my sister, and he had some friends in Mariupol. And he, when we were talking about Mariupol, because like I also take it quite close to my heart, because I love Mariupol, and it's an amazing, it was an amazing city. And we every year we went there for a little like break, just to enjoy the sea. And like I remember that we were talking about Mariupol, and he started crying, and I couldn't at that moment. It really was impressive, because like I could imagine it from a Ukrainian, but from a British, just a British person who lives quite far from Mariupol, start crying because of it. It was like truly impressive. Yes, and that's the kind of reaction I saw here quite often. So my colleagues, I was working at the school here, they were very supportive. And also like all the British people you talk to, they ask questions, they ask like, what can I do, can I help somehow? And amazing, like it's truly amazing.
Yeah, I remember at the start of the full-scale invasion, um, we had a family from Kharkiv come and live with us, and I was just looking around in my local area to find other people who might be able to take people. And even in my street, we ended up with three other families taking people. So, you know, we had three houses that had people from Kharkiv in, and another house down the road that took someone in with her kid. And you know, that was like every street in London was like that. It was like there were lots and lots of people taking people in and hosting people. I don't know, I kind of feel like London has a we've got that memory of England generally. You've got that memory of the Second World War, and we've got that memory of kind of fighting the Nazis, and it seemed very black and white when the war first started, that, you know, which country was in the right and which country was in the wrong. And I guess for a lot of people, you grow up kind of wondering, like, you know, what would I have done during the Second World War? And it's like, well, now's your chance to find out, folks. And you want to try and do the best you can in circumstances that seem incredibly unfair to you, and, you know, not so far removed from your own life. Because, you know, back in the day when I used to get the planes to Ukraine, it used to be like a, you know, 2.5, 3 hour flight to Kiev. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's close. It's, you know, even now you fly to Krakow and you can be in Lviv on a train in 4 hours. Even now, you know. And so your parents left when exactly, Renata? You said,
Like now I'm trying to remember. I think it was like September.
okay, just before the kind of the town fell, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had a very, very short gap, to be honest. Like they had a few days to leave, and lots of people were like this. So it was not like they had been preparing for it for weeks. So it was not like that. So they just got a signal. I think it was from the local hospital. Like as soon as hospital is evacuated, that means that the whole town has to evacuate as soon as possible. And that was the signal that they received, yes, and they left right after it was announced.
And why Kremenchuk?
No reason, to be honest.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
just you open them up and you're like, there. Yeah.
And how are they coping with everything? I mean, I imagine as a parent myself, the idea of having to send my son's 12 years old now,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea of having to send my son abroad and to stay here while, you know, we were at war. It's a very, very difficult thing to imagine having to do, and I imagine it must have a massive emotional impact on you. So I just wondered how are they coping? How are they?
Like at first it was difficult, yes. So, and I remember that I had to convince them that it is the right decision because they didn't see it at that time, and I just knew where it was going to go, and I knew it would be a better decision. And so children should not stay in such environments at all because even if it's not like affects you mentally, but it also could affect you physically, like seeing it and like
Yeah.
switching and so on and so forth. So that's why, of course, I realized that it should be done as soon as possible. And at that moment, yes, it was very difficult for them, but we were always in touch. And I'm not a mom, and I always point it out. And when we have like some conflicts or some situations where we are like arguing, I have this card like call your mom and sort it out. I'm not your. That's why still are her parents, and she understands it. I'm just her guardian, and maybe now they're already used to it. But last year she actually spent half a year with them.
Okay.
Yeah, and we were just experimenting because last year before Avdiivka fell, we felt as if it will be alright. So it will still be like there will be the war in the distance, but we will still be alright. And when our hopes just got ruined, so then my sister again came here
So your
and
sister was back in your hometown at this
yeah,
point.
yes,
So I mean, I understand how weird it must be to be, on the one hand, in a small town in Ukraine, 20, 30 kilometers from the front line, and then you're in a school in the UK, in
yeah,
a quiet little part of the west of England, trying to be a normal kid in a normal English school.
yeah, yeah.
These two different realities. Yeah, 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 yeah. It must be very, very difficult to process that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but what I'm really happy about right now is that she is now making plans for the future and she's like preparing for GCSE. She is trying to think like what could be the best career choice and so on and so forth. And
Yeah.
of course, it makes me very happy because like even last year she missed her hometown so much and her friends so much. and now she makes she's made friends at her new school, and I can see that she's trying to be a typical British teenager to like fit in, and she's doing all right. Yeah, so that's why I'm really proud of her. Yeah, even if it was very difficult, she did it.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter's 15 and she's getting ready for her GCSEs, and it's stressful enough already without anything else going on, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I would say that our Ukrainian children have learned just to be resilient, and now they understand like not passing GCC. It's not the biggest problem.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah. It puts it in perspective,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that's why I can feel that she is more like courageous, and she is more open to experiment, and she's like, okay, I'll try and we'll see how it goes. So I guess it's really weird, but I could say that maybe even the war affected her somehow positively. So she's like,
Yeah, kind of silver linings.
yeah.
Yeah. And I guess just to wrap up, because I know you have to disappear at past, how are you feeling about this year, about what's coming, about where things are at the moment and the state of play and all of that?
Um, it's still hard to plan your life, especially I'm not sure if you've heard of it and if you are in the context. Like lots of Ukrainians are quite concerned, those who stay in the UK, because we still don't know what's going to happen to the visa,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
don't know if we like I just said that my sister is preparing for GCSE, but maybe she won't have a chance to do it, yeah, because she's in year 10 and maybe we will be kicked out. So that's why it's like really difficult to make any plans for your life and for your future. So that's why I'm not sure how I feel about this year. So we'll live and we'll see. Yeah, but of course it's quite concerning, and I know lots of Ukrainians are quite like, what's happening, like can we stay, can we not, like what will happen. Yeah, so I still have like 2 more years in the UK.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Yes, but what will be next, I don't know.
And as you'll know, Trump came into power promising to end the war within 24 hours and is now sort of threatening to try to make deals with Putin without talking to anyone else and all of that.
Mm,
And I just wondered, how do you feel as a Ukrainian about the possibility of there being any kind of peace talks or any negotiations at the moment?
mm, I do not believe in peace talks, to be honest, and especially as a citizen of like Donbas area. So as a person from Donbas, so I do not believe, like we had like this Minsk
Yeah.
agreements and agreements too. Like I personally do not believe it's going to end like quickly, or maybe it will never end. I don't know, but I do not believe that Trump will stop it in 24 hours. How many hours has it been
Uh,
already?
Way more than 24.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I also believe that Russia is just not a person, like not an an entity to trust. Yeah, so that's why even if they signed 100 papers, it does not mean that I will ever feel safe in my native town, even if it gets deoccupied.
Yeah,
You know. Yes.
yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's giving me hope at the moment is watching what Ukrainian drones are doing to the Russian oil infrastructure and military infrastructure inside Ukraine, inside Russia. And I think that maybe in 6 months' time, when they've finally destroyed the vast majority of Russia's oil infrastructure, then there might be a chance to maybe start talking. But I think Russia needs to feel more pain first. And you know, the good news for me at the moment is the news about it seems like Ukraine's really getting its kind of drone war skills together, and they're hitting targets almost every day at the moment.
Mhm.
And I think the more the war returns to Russia, and the more pain that Russia feels in that respect from having its own infrastructure and oil infrastructure taken out, the better it is for Ukraine. And I know that in return they're still trying to take Pokrovsk, and they're still trying to retake Kursk, and they're losing 1,000, 1,500 people every day, and they can't keep doing that forever.
Mhm.
So we will see, I guess. But yeah, I also don't have any faith in peace talks in any meaningful way this year. I think there has to be a victory at some point, and the victory has to be fair and comprehensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Renata, thank you very much for giving up your time. I know you've got other things to do on a Sunday afternoon. I'll see you back in class on Wednesday, and I'll upload this later and share it and everything. And yeah, say thank you. Are you still living with the host family? Are you still there, or if you see them and you're in touch with them, say thank you to them, and wish your sister best of luck with her GCSEs,
Thank you.
and Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Yes, and also I wanted to thank you again for this opportunity. Yeah, so you must know and you must feel that it is important for every person who comes here to speak to you. Yeah, so because like hearing and even saying these things out loud in English, like knowing that okay, now there are 29 people, so maybe 29 people will hear it. So it's
There'll be a lot more. It's usually a good couple of thousand watch all these videos eventually. So, and thank you for being able to express that reality in such amazing English as well. I'm very jealous of your language skills like that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Of course, as a final message, I just wanted to remind everyone that Donbas is Ukraine. It is the territory of Ukraine. It does not belong to Russia. And I hope, of course, one day they will come back home and we will welcome them in the most heartwarming way. Yeah.
thank you. Yeah. All right. Take care of yourself, Renata. Enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
All right. Take care. Take care.